It is Monday, October 30th, 2023. We are at the old fire station, Hart Street, next to the National Library Building, Port of Spain. This is a press conference by the Ministry of Public Administration. We shall begin with a statement by Senator the Honorable Alison West, Minister of Public Administration. I am Abigail Bino, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Administration. Following Minister West's statement, the floor will be open to questions from the media. Thank you, Senator the Honorable Alison West.
Thank you, P.S. Bino. Good morning to all. To members of the media, thank you for being here. Members of my staff, thank you for coming out to support me. To members of the public. My comms advisor and I have been talking about what we should do to address a recent statement and an editorial in one of the newspapers indicating that the government has done nothing in its 9 years in office to address the issue of the improvement of the public service. So we were dealing with it, we were talking about having a press conference to treat with that, but then a particularly egregious article came out yesterday that we thought we needed to address more expeditiously. So that article, which is headed, Bring in the Fraud Squad, treats with the issue of the rental of Park Court building on Park Street that was targeted for occupation by the DPP that has been the subject of recent commentary in the newspaper and elsewhere. So since the Ministry of Public Administration is the ministry responsible for property rentals on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, I thought it important to come and address this issue this morning. So that the article, which was written by Afra Raymond, indicated that there's apparent flagrant corruption in effect in relation in particular to the rental of that building to which I referred. And he based this on certain quote-unquote facts, which he indicated that he got indirectly from the Prime Minister at a public meeting, I think he indicated was held in March. So this is the information on which Mr. Raymond based his comments, his conclusion, that the rent of the building that the government paid was $600 per month, that the size of the building being rented was 23,000 square feet, and that the rate, when one applies one of those against the other, is approximately $26 per square foot. So let me give you the actual facts. The building is in fact that portion of the building that was being rented for the office of the DPP is in fact 43,295 square feet as against the 23,000 square feet that Mr. Raymond quoted. The rent that was being paid was $500,000 a month rather than the $600,000 a month quoted by Mr. Raymond, giving rise to a square footage price of $11.55 as opposed to the $26 per square foot quoted by Mr. Raymond. So every one of his facts on which he based his conclusion that there was corruption in this process is incorrect. Each fact is incorrect. So let me repeat that for clarity and ensure that you got it. Mr. Raymond quoted a rent of $600,000 a month. The actual rent is $500,000. He quoted a square footage of 23,000 square feet. The actual square footage rented by the government for the use of the office of the DPP is 43,295, almost twice as much. And the resulting square footage rent that we were paying is $11.55 per square foot rather than the $26 per square foot quoted by Mr. Raymond. We have, at the Ministry of Public Admin, focused very closely on the rentals which we recommend to the government, because we are aware of the fact that the government pays a significant amount of money in rent. The average rental per month is $23 million. That is our cost. So we have been embarked on several initiatives to try to reduce this cost, because it is significant. One has to remember that the size of the government in terms of people and therefore needed office space is huge, so that we do need to occupy significant office space, a lot of which is occupied in Port of Spain and a lot of which is relatively expensive. So the unit which leads the property and real estate operations in the ministry, called PRESD, Property and Real Estate Services Division, has, with my guidance, been methodically trying to reduce the rents, and we are in negotiation with several landlords at this point in time to reduce the rents, particularly of our most expensive property. We have done several things, the most significant of which is launched a portal on which we register the properties. We ask landlords to register the properties that they want to make available to the state, either through sale or through rental. And we make this available. We have invited the Association of Real Estate Agents to come in. We have trained them on our system, and we have asked them to list the properties, because the wider the range of properties that we have available is the better negotiating power that we are in to be able to negotiate, and we have been pushing hard to get this done. The government has also embarked on several other projects. We have constructing and are constructing buildings for occupation by some of our more significant ministries. We just opened the building for the Ministry of Health headquarters around the Savannah. We are embarked on a project to construct a property for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development in the area where the old First Citizens Bank at the corner of Duncan Street and IDB, using those pieces of real estate. And we are currently planning the construction of a building on Victoria Avenue for the use of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. So in addition to doing that, to constructing buildings, we are actively seeking to reduce rents, and there are a couple of buildings that we have either acquired or are targeting for acquisition for occupation by some ministries. So to accuse the Ministry of Public Admin of wasting state assets by throwing away funds that belong to the state through the rental of property at ridiculously high rents is something that we cannot accept, because we know that our efforts have been headed in the other direction. Another allegation that has been thrown at us in respect of that building is that the reason we are willing to pay higher than market, it is alleged, for the property in question is because the owners of the property are P&M party financiers. The owner of the building is a company called Parkout Limited, and the directors of that company are Joseph Azar, Andrew Lakis, and Jeff LeBlanc, none of whom are party financiers. So none of that is anything close to the truth. And finally, in respect of that building, in determining in respect of any building that we rent, what rent we are prepared to offer the landlord and what amount we are not prepared to go above, an integral part of our process in getting us there is seeking a valuation of the building from the Commissioner of Valuations, and sometimes we also seek a second valuation from a private valuator. In respect of the Parkwood building, we did approach, as we always do, the Commissioner of Valuations, and we received a value in respect of the space we were to occupy equal to $551,000 per month. And as I will remind you, what we actually paid for that space was $500,000 per month. So having received the valuation, we began negotiations with the owner of the building, and we landed at an amount that is $50,000, $51,000 a month, less than the value that was determined by the Commissioner of Valuations. So those are the facts in relation to that property, and it also is an indication of how the Property and Real Estate Division of the Ministry operates in securing rental property for the buildings that we seek to rent on behalf of the state. In addition to what we have been doing to reduce the rentals, I would just like to point out to you that we keep on trying to find initiatives to improve how we operate and to save the state costs. So in looking at issues like the rental of the Parkwood building and others, because as was indicated in another article in the newspaper, this is not the first building that the state has rented for long periods and have not been occupied. Another one of them is 1 Alexandra Street that was rented just before the PNM party demitted office in 2010, that was not occupied through the majority of the 2010 to 2015 period. So we realize that more stringent oversight is required, and we are currently in the process of revisiting how Prezi operates, what it looks at, how it must do more in respect of oversight to ensure that we keep the costs down. So we are restructuring to ensure that we don't only, because at this point what we do is that we rent the building, hand it over to the relevant agency, and then walk away until it's time to renew the rent. We are proposing to recommend to Cabinet that we become more involved in the process. We continue with what we're currently doing in seeking to secure moratoriums on the rent between when the building is secured and when the entity occupies, because there's always a lull period while they outfit. So we have been negotiating rent moratorium periods. And what we need to do is ensure that the building size is suitable for the size of the organization. So we do an audit on that. And what we want to seek to introduce now is a periodic monitoring of the rental arrangements as we go through the period of the approved rental to ensure that everything is consistent with securing the state's assets and ensuring that we don't waste the funds that are made available in respect of these rental properties. Okay, so the other issue that I wish to address in respect of the MPA and the comments being made about the fact that the government is doing nothing to improve the performance of the public service is to remind you that we have several initiatives in place that we are seeking to introduce or have introduced and are implementing to improve the performance of the public service. Among them are the reintroduction of the Strategic Human Resource Management Council, which is a grouping made up of all the entities responsible for HR in the public service. We are working on rolling out a full suite of human resource management tools to ensure electronic and therefore more efficient management of our human resources. We are seeking to introduce an accountability framework starting from the top down so that public servants who don't perform in the way that they are supposed to will be treated with accordingly, and that there is an actual performance based on merit approach to promotions and appointments and so on. We are in the middle of a change management program targeting all the ministries. We started with 6 cohorts, and we are about to do the second installment of that shortly. We are proposing to introduce in January a more holistic training program than what we currently have, using the tertiary institutions in the country. And as you know, we are working on the remote work program. So those are some of the initiatives that we are addressing to improve the performance of the public service. You will see snippets of success in various ministries, but we are seeking an across-the-board lifting of the performance of the public service, and we are hard at work in seeking to do that. So essentially, those are the issues that I wanted to bring to your attention this morning. I want to give you the opportunity to be able to ask your questions. I'm sure you have many, so I will pause and address such questions as you may have for me.
Thank you, Minister West. I will ask members of the media, as you ask your questions, to please identify your name and your media house, and then proceed with your questions. The floor is open. Mr. Samaru, CNC3.
Hi, good morning, Minister. Akash Samaru, CNC3 News. You would have spoke about initiatives, and at the end you mentioned that remote work, you spoke about the need for the buildings and finding buildings to place workers, but one of the solutions is maybe we don't need everybody to come into Port of Spain. Where are we with that remote work policy? Where are we with this work from home initiative?
As I would have indicated recently, we have identified a successful bidder. We're in the process of negotiations with that bidder, and by the end of this month, we hope to get them started on the process.
And then what? So at the end of this month, what's the next timeline? What's the next
They will do their work, which is look at the public service, identify what issues need to be addressed, identify those positions that can accommodate work from home, what criteria need to be put in place to allow for work from home, provide a report to the government, on which the government will make a decision.
But when do you as minister hope to have this accomplished by?
What or when?
When? When do you as minister?
I have indicated that during the calendar year 2024, I would like to introduce this.
And that is something you all genuinely want to introduce. We have a lot of employers who, they talk about work from home because it's one of those buzzwords, but they don't really want people to work from home. Can the public service say that they genuinely want people?
I don't embark on an exercise that I consider to be futile.
Okay. You mentioned more oversight to ensure that we don't rent buildings that are empty, that we don't use. Of course, this in the context, and we're live right now, so this in the context of a country that some people are struggling to afford food and rent and school supplies, and then they hear X amount of millions spent on a building not used, X amount of millions spent on another building, you said 2010, 2015, not used. You would have mentioned some initiatives. I'd like you to see if you could just get into it a bit more so that people could hear that something tangible is being done to ensure that this, the Prime Minister used, he said what, colossal waste of money doesn't happen again.
Okay, so as I indicated, we're doing a combination of things. One, we are seeking to increase the stock of state-owned property that we can occupy to reduce rent, which is a revenue item that goes out and brings nothing in return. So we have embarked on that. We are building and we are acquiring. We are also, what I didn't mention, seeking to establish a storage facility outside of Port of Spain to store the excess paper that we will have as we continue to digitalize, because as we digitalize, we don't need the paper files, and therefore we don't need to retain the paper files in expensive Port of Spain property. So we're seeking to put these documents on systems and then move the paper off so that we can reduce the amount of space that we actually need to occupy in and around Port of Spain where real estate is expensive. And we are also seeking to restructure the property and management unit to make it a more active monitoring and auditing unit in respect of our real estate, to ensure that as ministries and agencies adjust in size, that we adjust the property to treat with it. Because what happens now is that we secure the property based on today's organizational structure. The organizational structure may change in a week or in a year, and nobody goes back to look at it until there is the need to renew the lease. So we are seeking to put things in place. We will go into cabinet shortly for approval to make the unit more proactive, more strategic, and more active in terms of assessing and monitoring and auditing property use.
This come around now, though. This has been a problem for a very long time.
Yes.
Why now and not before?
I can only tell you what I'm facing as the minister who is currently in the seat and what I'm seeking to do to deal with it.
Okay. And just my final
Can we
question.
give somebody else? Oh, you have one more. Okay, go ahead.
Who else? Okay. I'll take one more here. With respect to the that DPP office you spoke about, do you believe the JLSC needs to break its silence and explain why the building wasn't used?
Those issues have been addressed by the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, who are the proper officers to treat with it. I am treating with the rental issue.
Okay.
The floor is open.
Hi, good morning, Minister Sonal Lala, TDT News. You mentioned that you've invited real estate agents to register and so on. Can you say how many have registered so far?
When last I checked, we had 127 properties that we didn't have previous to the launch of the portal, and we are continuing to press to get more. Because as we get more, we have more options, and therefore we have more opportunity to bring the rent down. So we are pushing on that side.
And what drives you to say between rent versus the purchase? What's the driving force behind the decision?
Well, when you own property, as you know, because many of us seek to own our own houses, once we've paid off for that house, the only ongoing cost is maintenance, and so eventually the cost should come down. So as we seek to improve the maintenance of state buildings, we think that in the long run it is more efficient, more effective, more cost effective to have property owned. We will continue to have a combination, but to have a higher stock of state-owned property for use by the ministries and agencies.
And just finally for me, you mentioned you have valuators. Could you say who are the valuators, and is it a company used? Is it a person?
There are several of them. The names that come immediately to mind are people like Lyndon Scott, F.A. Farrell, and there's another one who we often use. But we reach out to them, we get their quotes and determine their availability, how quickly they can get the job done, and the cost. And we base our decisions on that.
Hi, pleasant good morning, Minister. Timothy Shastu
Morning.
from Guardian Media. Just to piggyback on our colleague's question, what would be one of the reasons why we, the state, would need to rent for extended period of time buildings that are unused?
I didn't get the question.
Guardian Media, could you ask your question again? We
Sure.
did not hear you.
Sure. Timothy Shastu from Guardian Media. Just to piggyback on our colleague's question, what would be some of the reasons we, the state, would need to rent buildings for extended periods of time while they remain unoccupied?
The state, as I said, the Ministry of Public Admin identifies a need by a particular agency, negotiates the rent to the best of our ability, seeks cabinet approval in the normal course of things as it applied previously, and then turn that property over to the agency that requested it. We do understand that the agency then needs to go in and secure service providers to outfit the property. They have to run the wires. They have to connect their computers and secure furniture, those kinds of things. So we do understand that that takes a while. And what we have been doing within recent time to mitigate the cost of that period, that where the building is being rented, but not occupied, is that we have started negotiating with the landlords for a moratorium on the rent for a particular period, maybe 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, depending on the circumstances, to allow us to, as we outfit, to not pay any rent. And we have been having some success in that area. We will continue to push for that. Because the property and real estate unit in the past has handed over the building and walked away, we have not generally been alerted to the fact that some state agencies do not move in as expeditiously as they should. Now that we are more aware of that, as I indicated, we are seeking to restructure the unit to have the resources to allow us to monitor what is happening to reduce the waste of state resources.
Are there any more questions? Okay, thank you, Minister West. Any closing statement, please?
Yes, I would like to say to Mr. Raymond and to others who are concerned about the operations of MPA that this ministry is always willing to answer questions in respect of any concerns that members of the public may have. Many of those questions come in the form of freedom of information request, but even if we get a question more informally, we are generally willing and able to respond to those questions. Our information in respect of property rentals in particular is even more readily accessible now that we have digitalized the records and launched the property and real estate portal. So I would urge you, if you have any concerns, to reach out to us to verify your quote-unquote facts before you start throwing around words like fraud. So I thank the media for coming out, and feel free to reach out to us if you continue to have any concerns or questions. Thank you very much.
This is TTT. Live for local.